Okay.
And now, Mr. Krupp, what we've been really excited about for some time is a presentation by yourself.
Yeah, so this is going to be kind of hit viral on
Oh.
YouTube as we
Definitely.
get going with this.
Definitely.
But actually, it's spring, and you know what they say about spring? I mean, spring is a time when every young man's heart turns to budget.
Oh,
So we are launching, we're deep in the middle of the budget development season here at Clackamas County. And I want to take just a little bit of time here this morning to give you a snapshot as to where we're going and what this looks like, with a particular interest in providing information to the public so that those who have an interest to participate, learn about, and weigh in on the development and adoption of the county budget have an opportunity to do that. So this is really just kind of a launching of information to you. I'm going to ask, it says show me the money. I'm going to ask Mary to go ahead and hit the next slide. What I wanted to do, give you a quick overview. This is actually this current year's budget, and it's a pie chart snapshot of the entire budget, the $825 million. It's actually much more complex than what the few slices on there illustrate. About 3/4 of that pie is really what we refer to as the general government budget. That represents the general government functions throughout Clackamas County, and I'll list those for you in a little bit. But then the unique thing about our county budget is we have a number of what we refer to as component units, or service districts. So, for example, we have 2 separate service districts that provide sewer services to citizens in Clackamas County, and those the budgets for those shows up in the Water Environment Services Department. The Development Agency has got a separate budget from the general government budget, and the other items that are listed up there in the chart as well. And all those have to be developed and adopted separately from the general government budget. The most interesting part about all this is we have budget committees for each and every one of those component units that we convene and meet and get advice for the final budget. That's in addition to the General County Budget Committee that looks at the 3/4 of the budget that makes up most of the chart. So let's go ahead and hit the next. So this is a breakdown of the general government budget by department, and beginning with the single largest department in county government is Health, Housing, and Human Services at about $112 million. Most of the funds that show up here in this budget are actually not local property tax dollars, but primarily federal and state derived funds to provide public health services, clinic services, community development services, and social services, including support to our veterans in Clackamas County. And then, of course, second on the list is the County Sheriff's Office, and this particular budget includes the jail operations in addition to community corrections. It is derived from actually several different fund sources in addition to the general fund, and that represents the second largest part of the county's general government budget. And you keep going down the list, and of course, transportation and development, where we've got roads and transportation, planning and building, even animal services is budgeted within transportation and development. So I'm not going to go through all of these items individually, but I wanted people to get a snapshot for the scale of the budget by department. So let's go to the next slide, and you can see there that the roll-up for the general government part of our county budget is about $606 million there. So yes, sir.
I just wanted to ask you a question about the DA's budget. The DA's budget, does that include the money we get from the state?
Yes, yeah, they get state money there, yes, they do.
Yeah,
But
so-
most of that's general fund, so. yeah.
Pardon?
Most of that's general fund too, so.
Yeah, I mean, his district attorneys, besides John Foote, are paid through the state, so that money's included in that. It's
Yes,
not part of the
so-
tax dollars we collect that go.
That's correct. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, either whether it's, can you roll back to the pie chart? Thank you. So I guess people ought to know that that white line at the very top, that's about 12 o'clock, that's probably that's probably bigger than it is the commissioner's discretionary money, isn't it?
That's a fair
We're not even,
characterization.
we're not even a line on that chart.
You're absolutely right. And the interesting thing is we're putting together the draft budget for this coming year. You'll all be proud to be able to say that the commissioner's operating budget is actually going to be less next year than it is this year. That's primarily because we're saving money on allocated costs going into next year. But you're right. I mean, we barely register on the chart there. So,
Well, we need to work on that.
okay. Let's go to the next pie chart after this one. So I want to talk just briefly about the general fund, which is actually part of the general government budget, but it represents about $150 million worth of the general government budget, and it's primarily derived from property taxes throughout Clackamas County. There's a little bit of federal and state money that comes into that, and there's some fees and fines and that sort of thing. But this is primarily derived from property taxes. And what we mean by unrestricted is that this money has the board has the most discretion in terms of allocating priorities. A lot of the other funds and a lot of the other money that's in the budget actually is dedicated to some very specific purposes, and we don't have a lot of room to kind of move and juggle it from one program to the next. But the general fund is one where the board has the opportunity to be able to set its key priorities across the county. So we'll go to the next one. And this is a chart that shows how that general fund money is currently distributed. You'll see that the lion's share of that is focused on public safety services. That includes law enforcement and other related services. Emergency management gets some general fund money and that sort of thing. But you could reasonably say, as you're talking to the public, that for every dollar that they pay in property taxes, 64 cents of that goes to critical public safety services to the citizenry in Clackamas County. And then what remains then is split among all the other functions, including the general government and administrative functions in county government. So.
Could you put that in perspective? Go back to that chart if you could. So that represents how much money?
That represents about $150 million right there.
No, this here?
The pie there represents
The
about
unrestricted general fund.
Is it 150
Correct.
million?
Yes, about $150 million. So
But even though we commit on the prior listing, the second slide, we committed 95 million of that to the sheriff, for example.
that's correct, because the sheriff's office is funded by not just general fund
Right.
proceeds, but also by other dedicated proceeds. So yes. Okay, shall we move to the next slide? I wanted to make sure folks know what the budget schedule looks like. And of course, doing the budget is kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. I mean, just as soon as you get done, you go back to the other side and you start painting it again. Things do really start, though, in earnest in January when we begin to develop our revenue estimates for the coming year. We calculate what our cost allocations will look like for costs related to things like technology and mail services and building rentals and that sort of thing. And we also at that time calculate our personnel costs, which are usually affected by any cost of living adjustment and changes in benefit packages. In February, we put together a budget workshop for all departments to go through the schedule and the requirements that we're going to be asking of them in terms of the materials they put together. And then through March and April, all of the departments eventually meet with the county administrator and finance department to review their draft budgets with me and my staff. So that I can assure that they meet the guidelines and requirements and are in alignment with the board's priorities, and also that everything balances by the time it's all said and done. And I take that information, and with advice and counsel of my key staff, I put together for you what is a proposed recommended budget that gets presented, and this year it'll get presented in the final week in May, to the Budget Committee. And we'll hold public meetings. They'll be held over in the auditorium in the Development Services Building. And the public is invited to be able to sit in if they'd like, to be able to listen in on those. But we have a public comment period, a hearing scheduled for May 28th at 5:30 p.m. in the evening for the public to come in and comment on anything they have an interest in the budget. We've got a little bit of time reserved in the first week in June in case we need it. We'll work on the component unit budgets on June the 1st, the very first Monday in June, to go through all of those. And then you'll hold formal public hearings on the final adoption of the budgets, and that then turns into a lot of detail work and publications that then sets up what is the ongoing monitoring and pursuit of making sure we're using the budget in the way the Board of County Commissioners has expected and adopted it. Let's go to the next one. For anyone who'd like to get involved, of course, our budget documents are posted online on the county web page. They can get to it from either the splash page, or if they click in clackamas.us/budget, they can find the budget documents there for this year and past years. And we also post our comprehensive annual financial reports as well, which is really the sort of after-the-fact document after you finish a budget year that reports on how the county performed during the course of the prior year. So that information is available online. We would encourage anyone and everyone to attend a budget meeting, come to the public hearing, share what's on your mind about it. And we are also always interested in soliciting participation for membership on our budget committees. We've got quite a few budget committees, one for each of those component units, in addition to the general government budget committee. And so it's sometimes a little tough making sure we're fully represented there. And I would encourage anybody who might be listening into the program to give us a holler if they are at all interested in participating on any of these budget committees. We'll go to the next page, because they can do that by contacting us via email at bcc@clackamas.us. Of course, there's the web page that they can reach us at. And then they can call the office at 503-655-8581, and we'd be happy to make sure they get the information they need. So that's my presentation, ready to get started. I can tell you this, yesterday I finished all of the departmental reviews. We've still got a little bit of grunt work to do in order to get the budget ready for distribution, the draft budget ready for distribution and publication, and still running and verifying the numbers that we've received from some of the departments. But I'm pleased with the position that we're currently in today based on the numbers that I've seen to date. So,
Good.
Commissioner Bernard.
So I noted that the county has a balanced budget, huh?
we do.
Yeah.
We are required to have a balanced budget.
Yes. Is the state required to have a balanced budget?
Yes.
I would assume
And
so.
the only one that isn't is the federal government.
That's true.
There you go.
The sheriff's budget, one thing I've heard over the years is first that we've cut the sheriff's budget, but the old, many times I've heard that the sheriff's budget was 80% of the budget. I don't know, I've never seen that. I mean, historically, probably, 100 years ago, the sheriff's budget was probably 100% of the budget, just about. But then also, in, let's say, H3S, where they provide mental health services to the sheriff, and to, at both the jail and out on patrol. In that, do they, in the budget, define where those dollars go? I mean, to the jail or partnership or?
Oh, we can cull from the budget notes and materials those particular figures. You won't see it in the immediate documents that get published and presented, but it's easy enough to drill down to the information and pull the numbers for you.
Yeah, you don't have to do that, but, one thing I would love a little history on the sheriff's budget. And then the other is property tax restrictions. We know that property taxes can't be used for roads. Is there any other restriction on property taxes that you know of, or do you know of any?
Off the top of my head, I mean, I can't imagine you using them for private purposes, but so long as it's a legitimate public purpose and responsibility of county government, you can, the unrestricted funds in the general fund are available to do a wide range of things that benefit the public.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about unrestricted funds, they're not totally unrestricted, and, for example, you can't use them for roads. So, but the, the small amount of the general fund that is unrestricted, which you said was 100 and something million, 116?
150.
150 million.
50 million, yes.
And I think that slide, I'd love to see that slide in comparison to the entire budget. What the commission really has the flexibility to deal with. I think that'd be a good slide to add.
Commissioner Savas.
Well, I don't take a lot of pride in telling folks out there, which is my point really, is that we don't have of that money, 805 million or the 606 million or whatever it may be, or the 113 million of general fund money. Irregardless is that we ought to have, I think we ought to have a little bit more discretion and have a little bit more available flexibility to adjust our priorities, because if we don't, how do we take the priorities we established and put those into action? And without the budgetary discretion, we have very limited ability to do that. I do want to note that Commissioner Bernard rightfully raising, yes, we cannot use property tax revenues for roads, but we are using gas tax revenue, which goes to roads, for things that aren't directly on the road that property tax can pay for. I think we identified 4.5 million of gas tax money that are being used in that way. So there is some adjustments we can make there to pave more roads, and I think that's the effort we need to make, and that's a prioritization. For example, one example that we could going and have greater discretion if we had a little bit more money to do that with. So hopefully we can do that June 1st.
Well,
You know, I'm going to weigh in on this because we have before. You know, there are evidently identified by our legal staff and professional staff up to $4.5 million that we can use for what is not, they have deemed to be non-road purposes, but in fact, every time we do a road, we have to apply to do a road, just like anybody else in this county. We have to apply. To me, that's a direct correlated response to the application, and it is a cost of roads to pay for those applications. In addition to that, one of the other ones described is that even though it's off-road, such things as guardrails, but again, to me, that's directly related to those roads. In addition to that, the Canby Ferry has been one of those identified, and it does cost money to keep the MJ Lee running, but it is a road. It's a floating road, but it's a road. So I think the biggest concern for those of us approving a budget is if we said, and last year we put $500,000 towards that, not surplus money, certainly, because we could have used it elsewhere, is if we're going to grab another $4 million this year to help out our road situation and really, again, related road costs, where does that come from? Whose department do we chop it from? I'm looking out here, some staff saying, you know, maybe we should just cut it from your department, right? Yeah, they're pointing at each other. But the point of the matter is we have a definitive amount of money, not an infinite amount of money, and we have specific programs which we think are rated higher above given additional $4 million towards really road-related projects. Mr. Krupp.
so it's all about the priorities of the board, and when it comes time to talk about what your priorities are. We'll be able to tell you precisely how much capacity you've got in additional revenues to be able to make those choices about. And then it'll be the board's prerogative as to how to proceed.
Commissioner Savas?
Well said. I think you summed it up. And the other thing that the people out there ought to be realize is that we have new revenues that are higher and above what we collected last year. So how those are directed is some of that new money, or ought to be some of that new money, that becomes more discretionary than the prior commitment. So,
Commissioner Bernard?
I just want to add, for example, if you drive around the county, we have a lot of slide areas. Now, maintaining a slide is not paving a road, but it's definitely part of that. And for example, the Sandy River Lolo Pass Road, you know, we had a lot of money spent in that. Some of it we got back. But all those things, just like, you know, John may be a conservative, but he has a big heart, and taking away from, let's say, community corrections money or health and family services, it's a decision you have to make that is not pleasant and something that, you know, I hope to get $1 million for roads. We did have some extra money come in with the Secure Rural Schools money, thanks to Congress and our representatives in Congress, which is somewhere around $1 million, we're guessing, right? Have we got to figure? And I'd love to see, and that money can be spent for road. Well, we don't. Is that part
It's unrestricted.
Yeah.
It goes into the general fund. It's unrestricted. It could be used for almost anything. So.
But we also had a mental health facility that is being planned, and they're looking for $1 million from us. So I don't know where we would get all that, but I just want to note that last year's budget was very good, and I've always believed that once we got out of this terrible economy, we would have some opportunities. This is starting my 7th year as a commissioner, and this is the first time that there's actually some good news. And the good news is we'll be able to do more because we're getting, because of the economy growing. And so I'm excited to have more choices than we've had in the past. So, and also last year I thought, you know, with a really tight budget, we weren't sure what was going to happen. You did a really great job, and all of us enjoyed the budget process, which is another thing I'd never done before. But also, you know, we're going to have something new that we're all going to have to learn, and that is the new process that these folks are going through. And some of us will want more information. Some of us will be satisfied. I just want to, when I started the city of Milwaukee, our budget was this big. By the time I left, it was this big. Now it's this big. Again. So, you know, as commissions or city councils change, I want more information, less information. But in the end, you've got to decide how to distribute those dollars and what impact they'll be. And I always think like community corrections. Talking to the sheriff the other day in CSAP programs, very important programs, saves lives. That's one of the best investments we can make because it saves families, saves lives. So that's kind of something, well, let's take that and put it in roads, but then we'd have those people out there and their families destroyed. It's a really super investment that we do. But anyway, I'm excited to have an opportunity to look at a budget that's much more pleasant.
Yeah, I do acknowledge that there, I don't want to call it extra money, but there is additional monies here. But you know, from yesterday when 3 of us were listening in a very small room to about the Intercept program, where they're intercepting perverted men who are chasing adolescent children through the internet, and how really underfunded that is. Then you look at Pathfinders, you know, a program that the state is going to start cutting seriously, that does excellent work and integrating people back into our population and addressing mental health issues. These are programs that I have a great affinity towards, and if you weigh it on the scale of put it into roads when you know, our tax money is not related to roads, it should be user related, or these programs, I'll take these programs any day. As Jim said, you know, we have a lot of excellent programs out there, and it's one thing to maintain them, but to sustain them, there is a growth in costs every year. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I really wanted to thank you for this great presentation. So I was wondering if we could get a copy of it.
Sure.
An electronic copy of it. And I'd also like to have a copy, so when I go do my outreach to folks, I'd like to bring this with me and talk about the budget. Oftentimes, I go out with Frank Maglin as well, who is the chair, the assistant chair of our budget committee, and we kind of do a roadshow with that. But this is one of the best presentations I've seen, and it'd be nice to get the slideshow and a narrative with that, so we can clarify as we are around the county. The other comment I want to make is that Commissioner Bernard mentioned secure rural schools. Yes, we did. I also want to thank members of the ONC counties, of which I'm a member of that board, and they very diligently lobbied with our folks as well to make sure that that was included in federal legislation so we could get our dollars. We are a member county, and they have served us well. They are always on top of that issue, and they continue to be one of the bigger advocates we have for appropriate forestry practices at the federal level.
If I may
Savas.
just say
Oh,
one
go ahead.
quick thing, I want to thank both Laura Buttman and Diane Padilla for putting that outstanding PowerPoint together.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
really great.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, well, I appreciate Commissioner Ludlow bringing up the intercept deal yesterday. We saw that presentation, and I want to acknowledge the sheriff for his great work in that, and the Child Abuse Summit that he puts on every year, worthwhile. But I think what my takeaway was, and I mentioned it yesterday, Commissioner Bernard, Commissioner Ludlow, and Commissioner Bernard and I were there yesterday. I do want to acknowledge that this has got, you know, this is around the world. This problem and the networking and this whole thing is, so I really, and I raised it yesterday, this is a state issue, and it ought to be funded from a statewide issue. It shouldn't be, you know, all of that burden shouldn't be on Clackamas County to solve. And I think that the financial responsibility and actually the teamwork and effort, the networking effort ought to be statewide. So hopefully we can maybe bring and form a committee or at least a setting where we invite our legislators into a setting where maybe the Sheriff Roberts can, number one, give us the presentation that he gave to them, but may perhaps seek a statewide effort to fund that, because I think it is terribly important, and important enough that we just don't have the funds to solve it on our own. And it's such a huge problem, it needs at least a statewide effort at the very minimum.
Thank you, Mr. Krupp. It was extremely well done, and I appreciate you doing that. I remember coming to you and asking you if you would give an overview, simply because a lot of people don't know it's budget time. Certainly not enough show up to opine about our budget or any section of our budget, and it would be really great, and you did a great presentation about how it works, and when it ends, which is probably as appropriate as anything else.